guys, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Allie if you're new here, and we go over fun crafts and activities together. So I just want to do a little intro today to show you what we'll be going over. So I'm going to be teaching you embroidery, hand embroidery stitches. So just some basics. There are so many to pick from, but I'm just doing some basics that I use in my own work, in my own decor, to make some different designs. So I'm just showing you some examples here, some different stitches that I used. A little bit variety, just kind of helps give your project more texture, more uniqueness. Here's another one that I have here in the trailer. Most of mine are in storage while we're waiting for the house to be finished, but I have a couple examples here of what I'm talking about. So just a variety of stitches for hand embroidery. And here is a piece that is actually just started, but it is a floral uterus. That was a custom request. You can actually see what this one looks like finished over on my Etsy, so I'll put a link for that. So those were just some examples of what the projects I've been working on, but basically that's what we're going to be looking at, is different types of embroidery stitches. I'll just show you one by one, and I'll put down in the description where to skip ahead to find the different stitches you're looking for. So let's get started.
Okay, so today we're going to start with the running stitch. So this is usually one of the first stitches that people learn, and it is your simple in, out stitch. So start with a knot on the end of your embroidery floss. And you're going to insert the needle from behind to the front and then back again to the back. Just back and forth. So if you're new to embroidery, you'll notice that your floss you're using most likely is a 6-strand floss, so it's 6 little pieces of string together. Your project, if you're following a pattern, will tell you how many to use. Often it has you split that in half to 3 strands, but just for ease of showing you what the stitches look like, I'm leaving it using all 6. So here you can see the running stitch. You can choose to leave the space between the stitches just as big as the stitch itself, or you can have this smaller gap between. It's whatever you want to make your project have the appearance that you desire. So basic running stitch, just your in, out. Used for a lot of different things. It can be straight lines, you can make curves, outlines of different projects. Remembering not to pull too tight to where the tension pulls on your fabric itself. Okay, so next we're going to look at the back stitch. So this is a way to make a more solid line. You're going to insert the needle from behind and go backwards a stitch length, whatever you want that to be. And then come back up a stitch length to the right. And you'll go backwards and put that back into the very first spot you came up from. So you're making a solid line. So we'll do that, excuse me, we'll do that a couple more times here. So the goal of the back stitch here is a way to make a more solid line, like an outline. You can use longer stitches like I'm using here. If you're wanting it to curve around, be a different shape, it's best to use smaller stitches so it looks like a nice even curve. But change it to what you need for your project. I'm going to go with a couple more of these longer back stitches in a straight line just so you can see the process. Go ahead and get out materials and just follow along with me if you're trying to learn these. It's the easiest way, is just to practice together. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of smaller back stitches so you can change the direction you're going in with them. So always going forward about a stitch length and then back down into that last spot you came up from. Remember not to leave your stitches too loose to where they're kind of bubbling up, or pulling them too tight to where the tension starts pulling and messing up your fabric of your project. So here's just kind of what you would do if you're trying to curve around using the back stitch, using those smaller stitches so it makes a more even curve shape. But for the straight ones, it depends on, again, your preference of appearance, if you want them to be the long stitches or a little bit shorter. That is what that one looks like. So next we're going to go over the stem stitch. So go in from behind as usual, go back down a stitch length away. Before pulling it all the way tight, come back close to that first spot you came up, leaving the loop above the needle, and pull it through. So again, go about a stitch length away, however you want it to be. And come back up, back at that last stitch. It's kind of like you're overlapping. So it's easiest just to see it. So I'm going to keep going here, but you put your needle through, come back up at that last point. Always having that wrong type of craft. Always having your embroidery floss being on the same side. So here I have it above. So it starts to kind of make a rolled appearance. This is good for a lot of different things. I use it personally for flower stems. It's kind of a different way to give more texture to a straight line. And you can, again, just like with our last stitch, you can make it go in curves, different ways, use it as an outline. For those instances, again, it's better to use a smaller width of the stitch. We'll see if you can see that one, but that's our stem stitch. Okay, so next we're going to learn one of the more basic stitches, just a straight stitch. So it is exactly what it sounds like. You come up from behind and you go right back down. So that is a straight stitch. And this is where I like to say anyone can hand embroider if they want to. You can make so many different things out of just a basic straight stitch. It can be used as an outline. You can make different shapes, different images, just from going in and out. If you do a bunch of small little ones like this, it can look like grass or seeds. It can be used in a lot of different ways. So straight stitch is pretty important. Also, what you can do with the very similar type of stitch is what's called a satin stitch. So this is where you do a bunch of straight stitches kind of in a row or close to each other. So you are essentially filling in a shape. So if you had an outline done already, you want something to look solid, have a more solid appearance, you can do a lot of these back and forth until you have a little filled space. So it is a little bit more time consuming, but can make your project so beautiful by having that filled appearance. So I've seen this done different ways, or some people like to always start by bringing the needle up on the same side, so it's kind of a full filled space on the front and the back of the work. And then some like to save a little bit on floss and come up somewhere on the same side that you just went down, as long as it's not the same hole, because that would undo your stitch. So whatever you're comfortable with over time, you'll figure out your methods, but basically the goal of it is just filling in some space, making it as solid as possible. You can always go back, you can see here, and if there's a space on your fabric that was left open, you can go back and fill it in better until you have the desired effect for your project. So there is kind of filled in space. See, for me, I chose to just have it on one side. That's what it looks like. Okay, so next we're going to do the woven wheel stitch. I've heard it by a bunch of different names before, the rose, wheel stitch, whatever you like to call it. Basically, how you start here is you are going to make a shape. It has 5 different little straight stitch sides. And if you look, it kind of ends up making a bit of a circle or flower shape. That, how far out you're going with those straight stitches is how big your wheel or flower will end up looking. So try to make sure those 5 are all even, or as even as they can be. Nobody's perfect, but that it's around the size that you want it to be in your project. So you make these 5 here, all coming back down the same center point. Once you have the 5 edges like this, you're going to go ahead and bring your needle back up somewhere near the middle, between 2 of the little sides. So how you do the woven stitch now is you're going to, between all these little pieces you made, you're going to alternate going over, under, over, under, all the way around until the little flower or wheel shape is filled in. So really important to make sure you are not pulling too tight, or you will end up with a bit of a mess. You are able to undo it using the needle to kind of pick and pull out of the shape, so it maintains a nice woven appearance and layers aren't going over each other. So basically you're just going over, under, all the way around until it is filled in completely. A good tip with this one is using a needle that is not super sharp can help. Also make sure you don't get caught like this, as it will make your tension too tight on the project. But yeah, using a needle that's not super sharp makes it easier to go under every other side here without accidentally catching any embroidery floss or fabric. It just makes it a little bit easier of a project. I didn't do that this time, as I don't have any other needles in our current travel trailer situation while our house is being built, but it can be done with a normal sharp one, just being careful to not catch anything as you're going under every other space here. Go ahead and continue on, or skip ahead if you like, to see kind of the end product of this one, but I'm going to just continue on making it. Remembering every other until it's completely filled in. And then at the end, I like to put the needle back down through the fabric to the back. And then you can use the needle itself to kind of fluff up your rose, or whatever you want it to be, to have the right appearance, the right shape that you want it to be. So there is a little bit of leeway and variety in hand embroidery. Even though it is more of a specific art, you can change things up to be how you want it to be, because again, it's art, and art is what you design, what you want it to look like. Keep it on going here with every other. Sometimes I'll do 2 at a time, just being careful with the pulling at them, that it's ends up falling in the right place. So it should start to look like a bit of a rose, working from the inside out. This is one of the first stitches that I learned, and I fell in love with it. It's a really fun one, even though it is a little time consuming. It's fun to make full projects out of a lot of these. Make a little flower garden, add some stem stitch below, and some leaves. You can see kind of how it's forming its shape. So just a reminder here, I'm showing you some of my go-to stitches in this video, but it will not be every single possible embroidery stitch, because that would be a really long video. There are a lot of different ways you can put a needle through some fabric. So get creative with it. You can always look up more complex stitches once you master all these go-tos that I'm showing you today. So your projects can just continue to grow and get more and more interesting. So we're coming toward the end here. You can see all 5 of my little starter stitches were not perfectly even, as some of them are filled in and some have a little bit of room left on them, but I was not being too picky, just showing you how this is done. I'm going to just pick a spot here, stick my needle back through to the back, and then because it was not perfectly even, I'm going to use my needle to just kind of spread out these petals to fill in that other little spaces. Hopefully I can get sorry for the focus, just want to try to get a little bit of a better view of it. But here is the woven wheel stitch. Okay, so next we are going to be doing the Lazy Daisy. This has a couple different names. Sorry, it's not coming to my head right now, but I've always learned and called it the Lazy Daisy. So I'm going to just show you this first one so you can see it and then kind of explain the process. So that's kind of what it looks like. How we're doing it here is bring your needle from the back to the front, wherever you want the bottom part of your petal to be. It's also really good for leaves. Put your needle back in somewhere very close to where it started, leaving a little bit of a loop, so don't pull it all the way through. And then wherever you want the end of that daisy to be, that leaf or petal, you pull it back up through within the loop, but don't pull it too tight. And then you stick your needle right back down on the opposite side, on the outside of the loop, to kind of hold and secure that loop in place. So the key of not pulling it too tight is you will lose that kind of round petal shape when the tension is too strong. So again, we pull up from the back and take your needle, and you're going to put it back in somewhere very close to where you came up from, leaving a loop. And place that loop where you want it to be. Put your needle back up through within the loop. And don't pull too tight. So here I'm just making a couple of these same stitches so we can make a bit of a flower to practice with. So putting your needle back up so it's within the loop. and going back down right outside of that loop. So it's like a little, very small loop that secures the petal in place. So these can be used again often for flowers. It's a lot of people's go-to, and for leaves. If you're making a more complex flower, a different type of flower, you can use these down on the stem stitch for the leaf. It's kind of an easy way to go to get a pretty shape that's not too complex or too many steps. So I'm just going to finish up my last petal here because I can't stand to leave something not symmetrical. And practice makes perfect, so you can just keep following along as we do this last one together. So there we go. That is our lazy daisy. Okay, friends, so next is one of my favorites, the French knot. So bring your needle up from behind as usual. Hold that working floss there and wrap it around your needle twice. You're going to hold those wraps on the needle as you go back in, somewhere right next to where you came out. And pull that knot down so it's right against the fabric as you pull through to make a knot. So let's do it again. So come up from behind, pull your floss all the way out, and grab it, wrap around your needle twice, and hold that on the needle as you go back in, somewhere right next to where you came out initially. Pull that knot so it's tight against the fabric with one hand as you push the needle back through the knot. That's the key part right there that takes a little bit of practice, but once you master it, this is the easiest way, I think, to get a French knot in your project. So let's try it a couple more times. So hold that floss and wrap it twice around your needle. That's how I learned, so I think that's the standard way, but I've also for myself, if I wanted bigger knots in projects, wrapped it more times around. Whatever floats your boat. Makes the desired look that you're going for. So let's keep trying a couple more. So bring your needle through, grab it with your other hand, wrap around twice, put your needle back in somewhere close, pulling that knot down with one hand while you pull it through with the other. I just realized, I should probably mention, I am left-handed. Hopefully that doesn't cause too much confusion or trouble in this process, because I also use my right hand a lot. I switch back and forth, so at this point I can't actually remember which stitches I've done with my right versus left, but do whatever is most comfortable for you. I usually have both hands pretty involved, and it might just be because I've had to do that my whole life, as a lot of things are made for right-handed people. So if you need to flip all of this, you can always use the speed features in YouTube and slow it down so it's easier to follow along if you need. And mix things up to your preferences. Kind of have a sad looking happy face here. Again, put your needle back through. The pulling with your opposite hand to hold the knot against the fabric is pretty important. I've found to make the knot go where I want it to go. We'll do one more here. Wrap around the needle twice. Put back in next to where you came up. Pull it against the fabric and pull on through with your other hand. And those are our French knots. I really like using them in the center of flowers. They have a lot of uses, but just one is in the center of flowers, or if you're making a flower like a lavender, using lots of little knots. So next we're going to be doing the split stitch. It's kind of just what it sounds like. It's another form of an outline stitch. So come up from the back and go back down. And then you're going to come back out partway through that last stitch, and you are, just like the title sounds, you're literally splitting that last stitch in half. So if you're, for example, using all 6 strands of your embroidery floss, you'd want approximately 3 strands on each side of your needle. So you're just pulling it back up partway through the last stitch, and then going back down to make another stitch length. This is good to give a bit of a solid appearing line for different forms of outlines. Again, it can be used in a straight line or in any kind of line you want it to be. But it gives kind of more of a complete appearance, not as many breaks or anything in it. I actually don't use this stitch enough. By going back here and going through all these teaching you guys, I decided I really like it. So I'm going to start implementing this one more, as it just kind of has a nice clean appearance here. So just like it sounds, our split stitch shown to you in just a kind of straight line. And here I'm going to show you a chain stitch. So pulling up from behind and then going right back down in that same spot that you just came up from. I like to use my double jointed thumb here to hold the loop so you're not pulling it all the way through, just like the lazy daisy earlier. I put my needle right back in within the loop and pull it not too tight. Again, just like the lazy daisy, you don't want to pull it too tight or it will change the shape. Go right back down where you just came up from. And same thing again, hold that loop and bringing your needle back up within that loop. So you're starting to form what looks like a bit of a chain. So again, not pulling too tight. You can see our chain here. It can give a little bit more of an intricate outline shape to your project, and I just think it's pretty. Again, going back up through the next loop, wherever you want that chain length to be. Now we have 3 here, and then going back down within it. So as I continue going through these, I'm just going to chat with you, but keep practicing with me. Real quick disclaimer, I also do a lot of crochet, so I don't know how many times throughout this video I may have mixed terms and said hook, yarn, etc., but just pretend that those were the terms we actually needed to be using here, relating to this craft specifically. I have 2 little ones, an infant and a 2-year-old, so my brain is often on mom brain recently, and I may have slipped up several times, but it happens. Nobody's perfect, so just give me a little grace there. Pull on up through. And also it's hard when terms switch between types of crafts, such as chain stitch. Okay, so there we are. They aren't perfectly even, but I'm not trying to right now as it's not for a project. I'm just showing you what it looks like. Okay, and the last one I'm showing you here is the woven double running stitch. So let's start out with just a running stitch like our very first one, which is just our practicing of in, out, in a line. Again, remember you can change the length of the space between the stitches. whatever you like it to be. I'm just leaving it all fairly even right now between the space and the stitch, the floss itself. So there we have a basic running stitch. So now to make it a double running stitch, we're just going to go back the other way. This can be done well in a circle, for example. A good way to get kind of a solid line within a circle is to do this double running stitch. Sorry, I got a little caught up here as I brought it in too close. It ended up an accidental split stitch. But the goal is to bring it up right at the end of the previous stitch. You're basically just filling in the spaces from your running stitch to make it a double running stitch. It can be done in a line, a circle, a heart, whatever you desire. So now it's become a double running stitch. So to make it a woven double running stitch, I think this can be done in several different ways, but this is how I've practiced it, is you're literally just going to weave in and out through those stitches. It's best if you switch to a different color of floss so you can see the woven part so it stands out and has some contrast. But I'm not switching right now as this is the color that I have sitting here available. But I'm just showing it so you get the general idea. So you're going to weave in and out, preferably in a different color, and it just gives a really fun, kind of more complex line appearance. So yeah, those are some of my favorite go-to stitches, some of the more basic ones, but there are a lot more you can do. So go ahead and subscribe and comment below if you have any specific stitches you'd like to look into more or what you'd like to see in future videos for us to practice together. There you go. There's our woven stitch. Thank you guys.